Hi, welcome to the Topologies live stream. My name is Matthew Skelton. I'm the co-author of the book Topologies, and this is episode number 6. It's actually on Valentine's Day, so for those of you who celebrate, if you're sharing the love, then that's a good thing to do. We're sharing the love here today, all about private equity portfolios and how Topologies can help to think through how they scale and how we kind of provide the right kind of support and growth. Help them to achieve their growth objectives and a bunch of other things. I'll introduce our guest in a little bit. First off, a few things to point out. So the next episode of the live stream is coming soon, so you can reach the live stream on teamtopologies.com/livestream. I'll just share my screen and pop that on there. So the episode after this one is with Roberto Linhao from Brazil, and we'll be talking about using Topologies to scale an AI platform. She's been writing about that and leading that initiative in her organization over the last few months. So that's coming up soon. We need a live stream link. I'll just pop it on the chat. That is this one here. So that's the URL for the live stream, teachbodies.com/livestream. You find all the details of all the future and past live streams in there. Catch up with them on YouTube and so on and so on. And over time, we'll be taking some of the material from these live streams and turning into other material too, like a downloadable book or a PDF or a printed version or something like that. So it's worth keeping an eye on what's going on there. I just wanted to highlight a couple of other things too. There's this article here, project to product transitions. So we ran a kind of webinar a few months ago between me and Valyonchev, talking about this product to product transition and some of the pitfalls around it, because what we see is loads of organizations kind of jumping on this, what can be a really useful way of rethinking how we deliver value, but then they're turning everything into a product, absolutely everything, and it doesn't make sense. So there's some nuance to how that project to product transition can be successful. So it's worth having a look at that too. You'll find that under our blog section. What else did I want to point out? There's an interesting discussion here in the leadership section of the Topologies community, where Alex Morgadas is talking about leadership as a platform. I'm actually going to put that in the chat so it appears in LinkedIn and YouTube and so on. And it's using the Topologies version of an idea of a platform. So in other words, in Topologies sense, a platform is anything that improves flow and reduces cognitive load. And we'll start to explore that level of concept in the live stream today in a few minutes. But just the idea of like leadership, kind of turning leadership around, sort of rethinking it and saying, what would it take for leadership to act as an accelerator by reducing cognitive load? And I think it's a really good framing. And with actually some organizations using exactly this technique right now. So there's a case study from Capra Consulting based in Norway, where they've done exactly this, and they completely reconfigure their entire organization to treat leadership as if the purpose of leadership is to kind of accelerate value delivery in other parts of the organization, partly by reducing cognitive load. So it's really, this is happening effectively. They're using the Topologies patterns for kind of whole organization change, a way of rethinking how organization can be run. So that's super cool. What else did I want to share? Final thing, Fast Flow Conference. Now this is not something that Topologies core operation runs. This is a conference that's run by practitioners, for practitioners, but we love what they do, and we like the focus, and we like the feel and the themes and so on and so on. The first two were in the UK. The second one is coming up really soon in the Netherlands. In fact, it's on 27th of March 2025. So at the point where we're recording this, that's just over a month away. So if you're in the area, or if you're not in the area, and you want to come along, then it feels like it's going to be a really good event. And I believe that they are also looking to expand worldwide. So maybe North America, APAC, and other places. So if I'm sort of speaking on their behalf a little bit here, but I do know that there are conversations happening. You can see there that there's 2 events, Netherlands and the UK. I believe that they're open to discussing that event happening in different parts of the world. So take a look if that's interesting. I know they're looking for sponsors for the Netherlands event. Get in touch. There's some amazing speakers there already. Okay, enough of that. Let's introduce our guest. And I'm very, very, very happy indeed to be joined by Barry Raleigh. Hi, Barry.
How you doing, Matthew?
Barry,
yeah, it's
great. I'm well. And I'll do a little intro in a minute, but Barry's got a significant amount of experience in helping organizations become way more effective and deliver things at speed, particularly technology-led organizations. But you've been working in this space for a long time. You've written lots of best-selling books. You tell us about where you are right now, because that's totally relevant today, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in a venture capital / private equity office with this beautiful background here behind me. And I've just spent the morning working with them, looking at their portfolio of products and businesses that they're growing. And looking forward to share some lessons learned around that. I'm also the co-founder of a venture studio myself called Nobody Studios. Our mission is to build 100 companies over the next 5 years. So we're sort of actively building up a portfolio of early stage companies, which is quite exciting at the moment. And excited to have a chat about this whole space and share it with your audience.
I mean, it's. I'm just sharing the website, Nobody Studios. I've put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
I think that mission is amazing. Like 100 new companies in 5 years. It's not just about starting them, is it? It's about seeing them like grow and be sustainable and successful, as opposed to just kind of just the fact that they've been founded. It's the viability.
Yeah, we good old Goddard's law, and once a metric turns in, or target turns into a metric, everyone gains it. But look, part of our thinking is like it's some people might call it a BHAG or a moonshot, but we're trying to stretch our thinking to the point where we're saying we can't do the same things we've always done before to build companies. We can't just sort of spend 6 months, doing design, building a prototype and launching. A lot of our methods really about having an idea and trying to launch that product in a week and seeing if it gets traction. And, there's lots of things that we've built and launched and haven't got traction even in the time that we've existed so far. So the goal for us is really speed, high velocity, and then, radical iteration, if you will. And that's the sort of secret sauce, if you will, about what our studio is trying to advocate for. And I think just with the new technologies that are coming online, almost daily at the moment, it's just making building companies much more fun, hopefully faster. But the rate of iteration and innovation is frightening, to be honest. Everything I thought I knew last week is now debunked this week, it feels like. Fun time to be in the industry and building these things.
Yeah. And of course, that rapid iteration then has implications for like how we even think about building kind of technology-centric products and services.
Absolutely.
Because we can't just like push out a few features and then next week have a different team work on that stuff. We need the context for what we built the previous week. We need to retain like that understanding of why we did it like this, and then actually we need to pivot and do something different, but we've got the context of that original, I don't know, data or service design or something in there, which we need to at least deal with, rather than just piling on more and more features in the hope that something will stick. Like it's a different approach, isn't it? It's more of a test and learn, scientific method, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's funny. One of the things we talk a lot about is finding the one feature that's going to pay for all the other features when we're building a product, which is kind of an interesting way to think about it. Often, with a lot of products, you have these sort of table stakes, if you will. you need a login, you need a search, you need a, for most of these components that you're building. But there's always this sort of differentiating point of what's going to get traction with a target customer and a feature that they really, really want. And that's what sort of gets them, if you will, onto the flywheel of using your product. And, we found time and time again, what we thought was going to be the killer feature is often not. But this context, as you're sort of alluding to, that actually becomes probably the most important competitive advantage for any individual team, because they've learned the sort of lesson, or they've debunked the assumption, and really the pace that they want to move at is often dictated by the context and how alive it is, if you will, in these teams. And again, our teams don't tend to be massive. I think the biggest team we've had is 14 people. The smallest can be as much as 2, maybe 3 people. So it can be quite fascinating. And then also, as you bring more people into the teams, that can cause drag, it can cause friction. And also, as you scale some of these products that actually succeed, the rubber band and sticky tape approach to what the product started with, that brittleness shows up if it has any meaningful growth or user volume as well, which often can require redesigns from a technical perspective too as well. So yeah, there's lots of fun and games and thorny things to sort of figure out. And it's not only just in the context of in the startups we're building. I know a lot of the theme of this show is around private equity, and again, that's a similar pattern that comes up when companies work together with these firms to build plans about how they plan to grow and scale and be more efficient. Often the plan is the best guess when people have the least amount of context. And yet again, until you get in there and you start working on it together, that's really, when the real information, if you will, emerges, and often debunks the plan.
Exactly. It needs this kind of, I guess it's humility, or at least a strong openness to being wrong, I suppose. Because it's like you might think that you know everything about a particular domain or a particular market, and you go, well, let's try this thing. I'm sure it's right. But then it turns out that your idea, or someone's idea, was actually completely wrong. Effectively, like, that's not what people want, as you said. And so, to be honest, in business in general, that's the way it should work. But in the PE space and the kind of venture space, as you said, like, you can't afford to be tied to someone's like assumption about what customers want. We have to be willing to adjust and adapt, and so on and so on. And the modern technology is helping us to do that way more quickly, potentially, if we've got that discipline of test and learn, adjust, actually sense something with data, like see what people are actually using, and then potentially pivot quite substantially, or just based on what the data. It sounds really obvious, but like when you look inside large organizations, or even some small organizations, it's often the kind of hippo-driven, hippo as in highest paid person's opinion, or it's someone who's got a particular, they're sort of personally invested in a particular like way of doing something, a particular idea, and it turns out that that's just not what's wanted. I've been guilty of that myself. Like this is really easy to do.
I think we all have at different points in our life. Yeah, like it's fascinating, right? Like on different sides of that equation, like in a startup, you often don't know what the plan is, right? You have a hunch about it, but it's highly uncertain, and you're executing and learning as you go, right? So I think often, you'll have founders that have very strong visions that they believe that, the solution that they believe in. So you're sort of helping those folks, look at the data and make a decision. I think in the private equity context, because typically those businesses have existed for a period of time, right? The management team have run businesses. They have some element of data. It's more an optimization of a business, if you will. And often when you're working with private equity firms, there's a plan that you've made together when they invest in that business, about how you plan to grow that business. And it's really you're working as a management team who's helping from a PE side as well as the management team that's inside that company to execute the plan, right? And the uncertainty might be lower, but I think what you're alluding to is often harder, is that people have a lot of incentives that they're locked into. They maybe were responsible for that product, and it might feel like they tarnish their brand if it doesn't grow in the way that they want. There can be, you know, the political side of these large businesses, but also a pressure, you know, like ultimately you need a business to grow in the private equity context, right? They're looking for the business to 3x potentially over a 3 to 5 year horizon. So there's pressure, like there's pressure to find this growth. And that can often drive perverse behaviors and decisions in folks too as well, when you really get into the guts of a plan. And so it is fascinating watching both of those sort of sides of the coin and the challenges that each face. And you know, how you organize, to your point around team topologies, and thinking about like what is the best way for teams to be most effective, to optimize for flow, to allow them to optimize their end-to-end processes. I think that's a really powerful tool when you're trying to get alignment about what the plan might be and how you would go and execute on it.
Yeah. Let's just take 1 minute or 2 minutes just to make sure that that we're not leaving anyone behind. So let's just take a minute or two to like talk through what does it actually mean to have like a private equity portfolio, or even like a venture studios portfolio like yours, and they're not the same, but there's some similarities. Like what's the purpose? How do they work at a very top level? What's it like to be then acquired by, like, say, a PE portfolio, and what happens after that acquisition? Let's just basically start from zero for anyone who's not familiar with this.
Well, like our venture studio is easier to talk to start, right? Like, yep. we have essentially a business that builds businesses, and we raise our own money. We have ideas of companies that we would like to sort of go after, and then in essence, we're sort of funding like the very first. We're the co-founder, the first investor, and the operator of these business ideas to try and get them off the ground. And the goal for us is to sort of incubate those businesses, hire a team, if you will, to like manage that idea, to scale it and grow it, and ultimately sell it. So that's how we make money as a venture studio. Is we only make money by building and selling companies, and we're optimized for sort of early to mid stage exits. It's what we target.
You plant the seed, you water it, you help it to sprout as if it were a plant, and then at some point you're selling that when it's still relatively small. Is that correct?
Yeah, ideally it may have raised its own independent capital. It should be an autonomous business, but yeah, we're the seed planter and the first sprinkler. But once it's got a shoot, you know, you're hoping that it starts to grow on its own. In that analogy you're sharing, where when I think about private equity, and just to pull on the plant analogy, you know, private equity is this idea that you've got a tree and it's bearing fruit at this stage. And really, what you're doing is you're bringing in an external group of people who have many years experience building companies. Often a lot of people who work in private equity are ex-executives or CEOs in big Fortune 500 companies, just as an example. And they are going into work with an existing management team to help them optimize and grow that business even further. So, you know, in the plant analogy, the plant is obviously giving fruit, and then it's like, well, how can we get more fruit from this plant, because it has lots of potential, you know? And
sometimes if it's a fruit-bearing tree, we actually have to sort of trim bits, because it's actually this part here is growing too straggly, and we actually kind of trim that piece off, and then it will bear fruit better over here. That's
pruning, absolutely. That's exactly what it is, you know. And but that's part of the plan, you know. So when you do these, when private equity come in and either acquire or take a significant shareholding in this business, there's a plan that's created based on that acquisition, right? And it's built in conjunction with the existing management team to say, right, you know, your business might be worth we'll just pick easy number. It's $100 million revenue business. We believe we can get it to $300 or $400 million. And here's the plan about how we're going to do that. So, you're working with people to define what success is, how it might operate, how it might be achieved. And then the private equity group, along in conjunction with the existing management team, work together to achieve that. And as you said, there might be pruning of the business model, the areas of focus, and also the existing team. As you may see, like changes in the leadership team as well. So the context, to your point as well, can change quite a lot with people leaving and new people coming in, and current business model focus shifting from one geography to another, or from one product suite to another. But there's generally a plan in place that you're trying to execute against, and that's sort of a little bit of they're similar in terms of, in the venture studio, we have a bunch of entrepreneurs who've built many startups, and they're leveraging their experience to grow these sort of early stage small businesses to something more mature. And with private equity, you have seasoned executives working with executive team, and they're sort of, if you will, optimizing and growing an already successful business to make it even more successful. And that's sort of where the similarities, if you will, sort of rhyme.
Yep. I think it could be worth like mapping this out using some diagrams, because the Topologies diagrams kind of deliberately are designed to help make some of this stuff come together. So I'm just going to share my screen and let's just talk through some of this now. So we've got these nice Topologies team shapes here in Miro. So at the level of your venture startups, then if we're talking about concept to cash, so this is Mary Poppendieck and plenty of other people have said it as well. So like, what's the way to get from concept to cash sort of as effectively as possible? So in Team Topologies terms, we've got a streamlined team. Ideally, we'd have no handoffs. So inside that team, as you said, you might only have 3 or 4 or 7 people or something like this, really quite small. We don't want to have one team doing one bit of work and another team doing another bit of work. We don't want to be handing off. We want end-to-end kind of like responsibility for what we're building at this point. Tell me if I'm wrong, but like this is what I would expect to see inside this situation.
Yeah. Well, this is where it gets fascinating, and again, why I love the Team Topologies example, right? Because what's fascinating about the venture studio is, if you can imagine, there's a studio level business, right? I personally work in the studio, and the studio has a number of responsibilities, if you will. It's to govern the portfolio. It's to source and provide resources to the portfolio companies themselves, right? If you can imagine it, like we're almost like the platform that these startups are built upon, and this is sort of the skills that we're sort of offering, if you will. And in the studio, there's a number of capabilities, everything from sales support, marketing support, fundraising, product development, introductions to help this, if you will, startup optimize for flow, right? Because what we want is that when these startups come into the studio, is that they have these, there's a paved road, if you will, a highway that allows them to focus on what they're best at and accelerate to their maximum potential. And really the value add that the studio platform is providing is where they have weaknesses and capabilities, or where they need support or acceleration, is there's a capability that they can reach out to, right? And I think many people can understand when you meet a startup team, nobody can do everything. Sometimes you have technical founders, sometimes you have great business founders with no technical skill. So you're constantly trying to build out, if you will, the best of the team around to take it to its potential. Yeah, so this is sort of very much how the studio model works, where we are trying to create this concept to cash flow which is a small cross-functional team that is executing against an idea, and the studio is really there to provide this sort of capabilities in a timely manner, depending on where they are, if you will, in the production process. And yeah, that's what's sort of fun about it. And as you're modeling it up here, it's just making me smile, thinking, yeah, this is basically my day-to-day life in a couple of boxes here. Yep. It's good.
Exactly. And this is why I was so keen to get your perspective and to hear it from you about this, because it really feels to me like what we've discovered since the Team Topologies book was published. So it's published 5.5 years ago at the point we're recording this. We've had 5.5 years of organizations like adopting or using the language specifically and using the quite opinionated terminology and so on. And clearly organizations were doing lots of this stuff before. We were inspired by what a whole bunch of companies were doing, but like we pulled together the terminology and the quite specific like lens, if you like, for looking at this stuff. So we've had 5.5 years of people actually using this specific terminology. And although the book focused primarily on teams inside an organization, inside a single organization doing stuff, because we made the concept sufficiently general, it seems to apply to situations like this. Like it seems to be a useful language for talking through not just stuff that happens in an entire organization, but like collections of organizations, like you said, like a portfolio here. Because this stream-aligned we can just call it kind of value stream. This could be a single value stream inside an organization, but this could equally be two separate venture companies, companies in your portfolio, right? So there might be another one. This is actually a separate company. So let's call it, ABC widgets. I don't know, or give me a better name if you want. But like,
I love it. I normally go for Acme Corp, so you can, it's fine. We can have Acme Corp.
Fine. There we go. So we've got two different startups that you've created inside your studio here, and they're really focused. So I don't know. Acme Corp is focused on, I don't know. Let's say something about health, and this is something about social media. I've no idea. Like, just for the sake of argument, just something simple.
Yeah, that's good examples. Yeah.
The point here is that ABC Widgets is focused on social media. That's where they got the expertise. That's what they want to zoom into. That's where the user need is. Likewise with Acme Corp, the focus is on health, something about health, and that's where they got the expertise, and that's where the user need is. And so they should be focusing on those domains, not on a whole lot of stuff related to sales, marketing. I guess there's probably finance, bookkeeping, a whole lot of other things in there that they're going to need to do, but it's not their main domain focus. It's not the main thing that they're trying to do, but they need to do it anyway, otherwise they're not going to survive. And so if you're able to provide that expertise, ways of working, and sometimes I guess come in like an enabling team saying, hey, here's how to do this thing better so that you can execute better, but you don't want to be working with them all the time. You'll probably go in there for like a couple of days or maybe a week, focus on something specific, and then sort of you've already uplifted their skills in that particular area, and they're able to execute better. Is that accurate? Is that the kind of dynamic?
That's spot on. That's literally how it works, and because this idea, like, it's almost a value proposition that a studio offers, is that if you are an early stage founder, your list of things to do is longer than you can ever imagine, and again, people have skills. Some people are great at sales. Some people are great at product development. Some people are great at operations, customer service, fundraising. These are all the different skills, if you will, you have to have as an early stage team and startup. And really the value proposition of a studio is that those capabilities are built out for you. So you need to fundraise. Here's that capability that you can pull into your value stream, collaborate with frameworks, tools, system, processes that have already been built out by the studio. So you get there faster, right? And as I've drawn here as well, there are times where, for example, when our studio companies are starting to fundraise for themselves, I'll go work with them for a week or two, to help them refine their pitch deck, help them refine their target investor, build a target investor list, teach them how to pitch, teach them how to ask questions when they're speaking to investors. So they get this sort of uplift, if you will, or upskilling at a time that it matters to them. Right? Doing that on day one just doesn't make sense because they're still in the product, if you will, definition stage. But when they've got a product defined and they're starting to have traction, then it's when's the next step on their value stream, if you will. So yeah, this is a very good, accurate type of sort of picture. It's nice to see that Luke McManus is enjoying our gardening analogies too as well. So that's always
thanks, Luke.
Yeah,
we've got a question from Eric actually, and I'll just pop this into the onto the screen. Are some of these services provided by the studio as self-service, or does it not make sense? So for example, sales and marketing and fundraising is do you are some of these things literally like as a software service sometimes, or is it more of is it a combination of software service and kind of sort of on-demand advice, or what does that feel like?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So the answer is it's a bit of both. And what's even more fun that we're finding is that some of these capabilities that we're building for our studio are actually becoming products that we will eventually offer externally as well, which is kind of fascinating. So sales is a good one. Our marketing, most people are generally familiar with. With marketing, essentially, we have a tool stack, if you will, that we would recommend the teams use that would help them, get up and running. And then we're teaching them a whole load of techniques like digital customer acquisition, product-led growth, how they can target and retarget with paid for organic marketing. There's a set of playbooks there and a technology stack that they can use and leverage, so they're faster, right? They're not starting with a blank page. And then they're also working with an expert in that who has basically done those types of strategies and deployments for everyone in the portfolio already, and so there's a compounding of knowledge, if you will, there. And as we said, we've sort of started to find there's a lot of engineers. I'm a failed engineer, I often say, but there's a lot of engineers in the studio who, if they've done something once, okay, if they've done it twice, they're already thinking about how to automate it. And I can speak from my own perspective in the fundraising side. We've built this a product internally that we called FundBot. And basically what FundBot does is once it knows what domain you're focused on, it is essentially, Nobody Studios has over 1,000 investors worldwide. And what all the investors have done is shared their LinkedIn connections. So we can essentially, we've already got a map of 200,000 people. And then we can map those people against companies or firms that we're either looking to partner with, invest in us, or do some sort of collaboration with. And FundBot basically does this, magic matching where we make people's networks visible to them. And so, if I said to you, hey, Matt, I've got a healthcare startup. Do you know anyone who's investing in healthcare startups? Instantly, unless someone magically appears in your head and you've got thousands of connections on LinkedIn, there's no way you're going to be able to do that, but FundBot basically creates a call sheet and go, Matthew, actually, here's, based on these people's profiles, here's a list of 20 people that we think might be candidates. Yeah. So again, that's the kind of efficiency that we can productize too as well.
I think that kind of fractal nature of the innovation there feels to me such an important aspect of this. So you might have a service in here that's like, here's how to do sales as a startup. You've got a lot of kind of pre-canned stuff, templates, blueprints, what have you, and it gets the startup moving. And it's probably 90% of that, let's say, is the same across any kind of startup domain or vertical or what have you. But then that value stream, which is a value stream, is providing that service. That in itself might be a candidate for like an actual SaaS product. That
Correct.
in itself is kind of cool, right? So that thing eventually pops out. Effectively, this how to do sales as a startup is in itself a kind of startup, right? So
Correct.
eventually
It becomes a new value stream in itself.
becomes a
I
new
think
thing in itself out here.
the fun thing about the studio is it's like multiple levels of recursion. So if you're a software engineer, you start getting quite excited when you're like, or if anybody who's watched in maybe Inception, the Christopher Nolan, where it's a world inside a world inside a world. It just it starts getting quite fun.
Exactly. But I think that kind of recursive or fractal, self-similar aspect, it feels really important in terms of kind of executing at speed and scale.
Absolutely, yeah. And you see this in your models, I'm sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, actually, because for me, that's where you start to create more value, right? Where the studio is becoming more valuable because we have systems and processes that are our own IP, if you want to think of it like that. That can either be capabilities that we keep inside the business, or we expose them, if you will, almost like APIs, or we turn them into standalone products in themselves. And again, that's creating greater value for the studio, and then a greater, if you will, incentive for more startups to want to come and work with us because they have all this sort of base infrastructure in place.
It's thinking about this mindset of thinking about what are services we can provide to the value consumers, whether the value consumers are internal or whether they're sort of semi-external. In this case here, they're sort of independently viable. They're inside the studio group, but they're independently viable. We want them to be independently viable. But this like mindset of, okay, what services can we provide? How can we define that as a kind of package set of value, effectively, that itself is somewhat independent? So we're always looking like thinking through, let's try and keep this thing independent and viable in terms of the value it's providing. And I think that mindset, what I've learned in the last 5.5 years, to be totally honest, is that mindset is really unusual. It's you see it all the time because of people you work with, right? But there's a load of organizations that managers and execs who don't think like that at all. And that's, I think, where a lot of the lack of agility comes from inside these larger organizations, because that way of thinking, it seems to me, is quite unusual. I don't know what your take on that is, but
well, that's why I wanted to ask you the question, because again, you have your perspective on this. I think because I come from an engineering background, I tend to think of organizations very much like component parts, and then I'm a systems thinker at the end of the day, really. Then this notion of creating capabilities that could, become products in their own right was just sort of like a fundamental, if you will, about how we thought about building the studio. Because again, from a product development point of view, because it's our own portfolio, every portfolio company is essentially a customer of our capabilities that we're creating. And that in itself allows us to sort of experiment, and if a fundraising bot works well for our own portfolio companies, there's this pretty high conviction that that's going to be useful for other businesses. So we have this sort of a little bit of an unfair advantage that it's a petri dish that we have a lot of agency over, but the nature of everybody inside that system is that they're all sort of experimenting and learning, right? They're coming from that mindset. The startup is trying to experiment to find a path to growth. The studio is experimenting to support those startups with the capabilities we offer. So the idea of flipping those into companies, then it's intuitive to, as you say, maybe to us, but that's why it's fascinating to hear that companies sometimes don't think like this. And I can appreciate that too as well. They're not often incentivized when people are sort of focused on their little project, or they don't have the agency maybe to think like, wow, how could I be creating my value stream, but how could it also become a contributor back to the bigger system it's part of?
Exactly. There's a dynamic, it's an ecosystem in here. But the thing is, this diagram here could represent your studio, but it can also equally represent the innovation that's happening inside a larger organization. Like the diagram is sort of looks basically the same. It just would turn out that we've got different value streams from inside an organization. They're exploring different things and expecting to consume some sort of standardized services that help to reduce their cognitive load and help to improve flow from an internal platform. And that internal platform might find a service which actually ends up being really valuable to expose, at least to more internal customers, but potentially even to create like a SaaS version of that thing. And it's the same dynamics. I think that with the venture studio thing, it becomes very clear because each of these value streams up here, ABC, Widgets, Acme, are literally separate companies. But then you seeing your leadership value as like a sort of a platform, you're trying to keep those companies independent, and because you're not going to merge them into the same company. You're not going to merge ABC Widgets with Acme Core, almost certainly not. So there's that. It's already they're already naturally separate. I guess the challenge in bigger organizations is that there's this tendency to kind of smoosh things together, and then we lose the value of that nimbleness that comes with them being independent.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And to your other question then about private equity, again, it's very similar, right? The function of the private equity business is much like the function that the studio provides in a venture studio. Right, it's a platform, and people that operate within the PE company are experts in their domains, right? And the value streams, while they're little startups here, they could be massive corporations in a private equity world. So yeah, it's again, the joy of team topologies. It's a great tool to share the thinking.
There's another book which has just come out actually from IT Revolution. And Luke, thanks for that. Unbundling Enterprise. Have you seen this yet?
I haven't. No.
So it's actually really cool. So unbundling the enterprise, APIs, optionality, and the science of happy accidents. And it's effectively the book. I wish I'd written this book, to be totally exposed to busy.
Yeah.
But it's from the same publisher as TT. But it's trying to apply these kind of principles like across the whole organization, using exactly the stuff we've been talking about here. So thanks, Luke. That's a good reminder.
Great. Well, I'll hit up Gene Kim and try and get a copy out of him.
Get a copy. But I think this stuff is really important because there's some fundamental assumptions about what an organization is, or like how we think about the dynamics in the organization. What is leadership? What's that supposed to be? Like the idea of providing a service. So some people seem to have a real mental block about that, because I'm serving someone else's needs, and that means that I'm somehow, lower down in the hierarchy or something. That there's some really strong mentality around this, which we've uncovered in the last few years, which to my mind is understandable but really strange. But like, if we want these outcomes, if we want to help these companies grow, then we need to provide some stuff to help them do it. Like it's like a no-brainer to me, but it seems to be a real challenge for some people. I don't know whether you've seen that either.
Yeah, of course. Like when it's very hard when you're in these big companies to see the system as well. Like it's one of the things that's great about the studio is it is a relatively small system, right? There's a lot of moving parts. But we might have 10 or 14 portfolio companies at any one time, but this picture that you drew here, like I could show that to anybody who works in the studio or works in the startup, and they can go, I can see myself in this picture and how it works. I think sometimes when you're in that 10,000, 30,000, 1,000 person organization, and you're down in the bells working on a user story, it's definitely very hard to see the bigger picture, because the picture is often not as elegant as you were able to draw that, or as understandable, right? And so it does drive this sort of this is my little bit of the world, and I'm measured on and bonused on and everything on getting my little user story done, in this big monster of a system. And it is hard to see it, but maybe this is one of the things to encourage more, right? I think as people do start to embrace these ideas of systems thinking, that there's more mapping and visualization of systems. And as you said, executives have a notion that helping people understand how the system works together, like a great strategy is a coherent set of actions, and people can see how the strategies come together. I think you might get a little less resistance and a little bit more engagement, maybe.
Yeah, it's ultimately organizations are moving towards a more generative approach. So away from pathological and bureaucratic towards the empowering teams. Like answering this question, I gave a keynote talk yesterday, and I tried to work out what's one of the most important, or perhaps the most important question for leadership inside an organization to tackle. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something like this. It was how can we empower groups of humans and AI agents to make localized decisions that align with the broader vision, something like this. Like, because we can't be directing top down. We need to enable an ecosystem of like empowered groups of people and AI agents doing stuff, but where we can trust them. So we don't allow people to make changes to any part of the code or any part of the data in the organization. Like, we're not going to allow AI agents to do the same thing either, because we need to have an understanding of where the boundaries of context are going to be, and so on and so on. So like, it feels, instead of trying to control every detail, it's like, how do we set things up so that we've got these empowered groups doing things that are basically substantially aligned? And I guess that's what Topologies ultimately is trying to answer. This is what I've realized, that underneath all of the stuff about teams and team types and cognitive load and Conway's law and stuff, underneath it's probably trying to answer that question. That's, I think, what we tried to do. And what in your books, particularly the Lean Enterprise one, but in all of your writing that I've seen as well in the last few years, is coming from that same sort of assumption. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we've got that shared underlying assumption. This is what we need to do in order to help innovation happen, to help companies grow. It's that sense of, we need to empower them. We're not telling them what to do. We're not controlling every little detail. We're setting things up to be like autonomous and self-sufficient and so on.
Yeah, like I always loved the way, like, I think Netflix are one of the first people to nail the language on it. Like, freedom with responsibility is one I always liked, when they sort of gave these, if you will, guidances, right? Like, agency isn't just like let teams run off and do whatever they want, right? No. Yeah, and but the sort of the thing you have to offer those teams is context to this question we said before. Is like, you have to sort of set boundaries and then define, if you will, the behavior you want them to perform, which might be moving a metric forward. It might be improving, some sort of outcome that they're working towards. But then you set boundary conditions for how you expect them to behave, operate, policies. That's a place, a sandbox, if you will, to play in. And the sandbox extends as you show conviction and competence, really. And so, because that's a two-way street, right? Is you sort of have to set the context for people, so they know what the rules of engagement are, what the boundary conditions are, and what the outcomes are, and then let them operate. And then really the collaboration should be revisiting: is the outcome correct? Were the boundaries correct? Do we need to reevaluate? And exactly. That's what I've seen. Work best in companies, but it's hard to do, and we're never, there's very rarely do I come across companies where they're good at defining what focus the company is going to have, the 2 or 3 areas that they really want to double down on, that the propensity just to take more work in opportunistically, and then a leadership not having a boundary that they're going to operate within, or adapting their boundary over time. It has to be on both sides of the picture. And I think it's a struggle for most businesses to be that disciplined. But when they can get to that, is where I've seen some really amazing things happen. in companies big and small.
And that's actually relates to this question here. So, some on LinkedIn. So, for the startups that have done well, so grown 3x and profitable, or whatever the measure of success is for your companies, are there any commonalities you've noted in the mindset and actions? Maybe you've already partially answered that question. It's like leadership teams who expect to put some guardrails in place and some defined ways of behaving and things like that. Is that?
Yeah, it's very true, right? Like we so a lot of these in the studio as well, a lot of people join the studio because they're not experienced entrepreneurs. But they might have an insight or a skill in some new technology or business domain or a niche, right? So they have some very strong competencies, and then they have areas that they're aware that they don't have. And then part of what the studio sort of, if you will, like the reciprocity is, the studio has a bunch of entrepreneurs who have a lot of experience, but they mightn't know that new technology or niche that these entrepreneurs are bringing in, right? So part of my role in the studio is not to tell these people how to build companies. It's actually to work with them to get the best out of both of us. So leveraging my experience, network, insight, and, if you will, like repeatability of certain parts of venture building with almost their raw sort of energy and enthusiasm to like run through walls. But they also have expertise too as well, and so it's, but the biggest thing to the person's question, the number one indicator for success is talent. There's no two ways about it. It does all come down to people, and we have made mistakes many times where on the surface, we've hired people who have the perfect CV, who, understand the domains, but maybe they had a manager gene rather than an executor gene. And maybe they've had, the on the surface, they had all the brand that we thought was right. But, when you put them into an early stage context, they're like, oh, no, that's actually not what I do. I'm actually better at optimizing businesses, and again, it's no fault of the individual, but you've got the wrong person playing the wrong position. And that is a very expensive sort of choice to get wrong in early stage startups, because you've such limited resources and time. You sort of need people to get in and play the position well from the beginning.
It's the right people in the right seats, isn't it? Is I think how my my mentor put it. We're heading towards the close, but I just want to noodle on a little bit of an extra thing. I'm going to share my screen before we close, and to get your sense on this. We've got ABC widgets. They've discovered a really good way of doing something, and actually, it's not there yet in the rest of the portfolio, in the rest of the studio. It's not yet provided. But here's a really good way of using generative AI or something like this, right? So they've discovered it here, green. It feels a bit of a shame if Acme Corp has to spend all of their time discovering that same thing themselves, and then another studio company down here doing the same discovery, and so on and so on. And we see this in organizations all the time. So like there's 100 teams, like 93 of them are all like trying to integrate ChatGPT or something like this.
Everyone's building a data analytics platform. Isn't that the answer?
Exactly. It's like massively wasteful, like literally financially wasteful. And it feels to me like there's a real need for us to actively diffuse this knowledge and awareness across the ecosystem, effectively, whether it's a single organization or whether it's even like a portfolio, like a PE portfolio, for example. So we were talking to one PE portfolio recently where they had exactly this problem. They knew they could see the same discovery or the same time being spent on these on innovation across all of their portfolio, and they're like, they're all wasted. It's good. It's the right thing for them to do, but effectively, it's already been discovered. We can actually, if there's a way of bringing that knowledge and diffusing it actively across the rest of the organization, then they would save some time.
Yeah. So
is that a thing that you do? Do you have like sharing events and things like this across? We do,
yeah. So we have monthly portfolio reviews, that are less focused on bring out your metrics and let's beat you up because you didn't hit them. But, it's actually focused on what is a sort of novelty or a unique breakthrough that you've had in the last month, which again, it allows teams to showcase as is some of these stars that you've put in place. And then it's a collective bar raising activity. But we don't just stop there with this sort of process point of view. We actually incentivize it. So every company that's in the portfolio also owns a piece of the studio. So the teams are actually, if any of the portfolio companies succeed, everybody succeeds, which is again another one of these unique sort of incentive structures we have. So it actually encourages the teams to share, because they know if Acme Corp figures out a cool way to do a growth hack for customer acquisition, they want to tell the rest of the portfolio, because they're creating capability and more value for the whole portfolio, which if any of them succeed, they see upside in. So it's not just a philosophy, it's an incentive structure as well. And
an incentive structure as well. Yeah. That's music to my ears, because this feels like a key thing that's part of it. And we're doing some work at the moment with inside organizations where we're trying to help the organization to work out what would be a sensible set of incentives to use across teams to encourage them to share. It's not going to be like financial incentives directly, but it might relate to kind of performance, how performance is measured and that kind of thing. But like that's part of the dynamic, isn't it? Like that innovation dynamic. Effectively, we're doing this together to an extent, and if we do some of this stuff together, we're going to succeed better individually as well.
Right on.
Grand. Thank you so much. Right. So people can find you online, barryo'reilly.com, correct? I'm just going to pop that in the
thank
chat.
you. Yeah, I'm available on all good websites at barryo'reilly.com. You know, if they're interested to learn more about Nobody Studios, again, it's nobodystudios.com. We're celebrating 10 years of Lean Enterprise, which was released 10 years ago last week, which was kind of fun. So yeah, it was great. I was in Nashville last week with some other people who were in the Lean series, and hanging out with them was quite fun to celebrate and commiserate each other with how much things have been achieved and how little have been achieved. But it's been great to come and share, and appreciate you taking the time and modeling up the studio and our work. Again, for many people, I had the joy of being at one of your first ever workshops for Team Topologies, and it's been amazing.
Early, wasn't it?
See yourself and please grow, and congratulations with it. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Barry, thank you so much. It's been great. Love it. All the best.
All right, man. Take it easy. Bye.
Thank you so much.